From Occupy Wall Street to Occupy Oakland, economic inequality is still in the news. And on public television? Well, PBS's flagship newscast dedicated a segment on October 26th to a guest who believes inequality is a good thing. That guest was New York University Law School professor Richard Epstein, who presented a John Stossel-esque view of the economy. Inequality creates incentives for everyone to do better. Raising taxes on the wealthy would be a disaster. Businesses are overburdened with regulation. When he was asked if the top 1% has too much power over our politics, Epstein explained that they ought to. Quote, "The last thing you would want to do in any kind of sensible society is to have a set of rules in which one man, one vote dictates over every issue." Close quote. And for good measure, the interview closed with Epstein saying he was fond of a famous Abraham Lincoln quote, "You do not make the poor rich by making the rich poor," which is something that Abraham Lincoln never said. The NewsHour posted a correction on its website, and a few days later, correspondent Paul Solman defended the segment after what he called an avalanche of criticism from fair activists. Solman cited all the great work he thinks he's done on inequality over the years. But the core question here remains, is PBS, which is supposed to feature views that aren't heard elsewhere, really living up to its mission by presenting the views of the 1%? We thought they were being heard loud and clear.
News that NPR stopped distributing a show about opera when it learned that the show's host was taking part in Occupy protests in Washington, D.C., left many people wondering just what is considered a controversial activity for a media worker to take part in. How extreme a position do they have to take to set off official alarms? Well, you might ask Caitlin Curran, a freelance web producer for The Takeaway, a talk show co-produced by New York station WNYC and Public Radio International. Curran went to an Occupy Wall Street protest with her boyfriend and briefly held up a sign. WNYC's response? They fired her. A spokesperson said Curran's participation in the protest violated journalistic standards and, quote, more specifically, WNYC's editorial guidelines, which require that editorial employees be free of any conflict that might compromise the work of the show overall, close quote. Just how her participation presented a conflict or compromised the show was not elaborated. Perhaps it was the controversial nature of the views she expressed. Curran's sign read as follows, quote, "It's wrong to create a mortgage-backed security filled with loans you know are going to fail so that you can sell it to a client who isn't aware that you sabotaged it by intentionally picking the misleadingly rated loans most likely to be defaulted upon," close quote. So that explains it. I mean, if you found out that the part-time web producer of a public radio show that bills itself as inviting listeners to be part of the American conversation expressed such a view, you'd want them fired immediately too, right?